Initially, reports were circulated that renowned poet and surgeon Oliver Wendell Holmes had perished in the wreckage. But once again, the stories of a celebrity dying proved untrue. Not so lucky were the 30 doctors from the American Medical Association who were returning by train from a convention in New York City. 5 of their number were among the 43 victims who were crushed to death or drowned in the catastrophe.
In New Delhi, India, 300 people were killed in a train wreck by 2 separate passenger lines. The accident occurred after the Kalendi Express hit a cow on the track. Train wrecks will return on Modern Marvels in a moment.
By the middle of the 19th century, railroads were on their way to becoming the largest industry in America. In 1850, more than 40 manufacturers were building locomotives, and an estimated 3,000 steam engines were crisscrossing the countryside on 9,000 miles of track. 10 years later, these numbers had tripled. In 1860, approximately 9,000 locomotives were in use, and 30,000 miles of rail had been laid. But safety appliances were introduced more slowly. The kerosene-burning headlamp became an aid to night travel. A swiveling set of wheels called a lead truck was placed at the front of the locomotive. The lead truck reduced derailments by keeping the train on the track when it was navigating curves. In those days, it was common for trains traveling in opposite directions to occupy the same track. Early railroad regulations dictated that when a conductor believed another train was approaching, he had to order his engineer to stop and wait in an area of track called siding. Only after the approaching train had passed could the order to proceed begin. Sometimes the wait lasted hours, with every minute costing the company money. In 1851, the telegraph was used for the first time to send information about the location of an oncoming train. The messages received by telegraph made it possible to decide whether a train could proceed safely without having to wait. This was a major development in rail safety. Unfortunately, it took many years and many lives before the telegraph was universally adopted by the railroads. In the meantime, the railroads used timetables to dispatch and locate trains. There was a difficulty with the system, however. Time was not yet standardized. Timetables were based on local time, which varied from community to community. When the sun was directly overhead, it was noon. In the state of Illinois alone, there were 27 different local times. Wisconsin had 38. It has been estimated that at one point the railroad scheduled trains using as many as 100 different times. The confusion this caused led to many disasters. A crash at Camp Hill, Pennsylvania on July 17, 1856 was due to a conductor not paying strict attention to his timetable.
It was an outing of a large extra of children who were on their way from their church in Philadelphia to a picnic. And along the way, their engineer disregarded timetable and ended up coming around a corner to find the scheduled train directly in front of him. And 67 people were killed in that wreck, mostly children, mostly burned.
A telegraphed message relaying the positions of the 2 trains could have prevented the disaster. The conductor of the scheduled train was so distraught that before the day was out, he committed suicide by swallowing arsenic and morphine. Ironically, he was later absolved of any wrongdoing. Instead, a jury placed the blame on the conductor of the train carrying the children. His train was 23 minutes late at the time of the Camp Hill wreck. In fact, Throughout the history of railroads, human error has always been the major cause of train disasters.
The engineers were made into heroes because they ran the biggest, most important machines in this country. In fact, the engineers were not all that different than young men with their sports cars today who drive them too fast.
America's most famous engineer was Casey Jones. Casey, whose real name was John Luther Jones, was an engineer for the Illinois Central Line. On the night of April 30th, 1900, Casey died trying to make up time on a run from Memphis, Tennessee. The wreck occurred when he rounded a curve near Vaughn, Mississippi, and saw a freight train on the track in front of him. Casey told his firemen to jump, then grabbed the whistle and brakes and rode the train into history and song.
He jumped, bounded to the cabin as he took his farewell journey to the promised.
The railroad didn't like Casey very much. Casey wrecked one of their locomotives. He was typical of the engineers of that period. The important thing was to get the train over the road, make up time. And if you needed to sort of skirt the rules a little bit, then you do that. But that shows you the attitude of both railroad labor and railroad management in those days. If you could get away with it, management loved you. If you didn't get away with it, you were dead, and they wrote you off.
The overwhelming majority of railroad fatalities have been employees, not passengers. Train crews often worked hard, long shifts. Stories of wrecks caused by a sleeping engineer behind the throttle were common. The engineer and firemen were always the first ones to die in a head-on collision. Because the passenger cars were made of wood, fire was another cause of injury and death in 19th century train accidents.
They were heated with coal stoves, so that in any kind of serious wreck, a derailment of any sort, the car would tip and the coal stove would tip over, scattering these red-hot coals all over the place. People were trapped in the wreckage, couldn't get out, and burned up.
One of the worst train fires occurred on a dreary December 18th in 1867. A service known as the New York Express was traveling eastbound along the eastern shore of Lake Erie at Angola, New York. Just as the train was nearing a bridge which spanned a frozen creek, a faulty axle caused the last car to derail. With many passengers on board, the car was dragged sideways along the bridge. It eventually uncoupled from the rest of the train and careened 40